After 8 children, I've come to a conclusion most psychologists don't like. Nature beats nurture. You can spend your whole life teaching kids about patience, thrift, and discipline. But if it isn't in their wiring, you might as well be lecturing a cat about delayed gratification. Some people are born prudent. Others are born broke. And the difference has less to do with education than with temperament. I've watched it my entire life. You meet a woman who's 95 years old, wearing a coat older than most hedge fund managers, and she's quietly sitting on 4,000 Berkshire A shares. That's over $2 billion, give or take, depending on when you're counting. But she still clips coupons, still buys generic cereal, still lives in the same house she did 50 years ago. People like that didn't need a finance class. They came pre-installed with discipline. Meanwhile, you'll see their grandchildren, the second or third generation, wandering around with diamond watches and vintage cars, thinking they're clever because they can afford old jewelry. They're not clever. They're living off the prudence of someone long dead. That's the funny thing about capitalism. It rewards good genes just as much as it rewards good judgment. And sometimes it punishes both if you hand them to idiots. People love to believe they can train themselves into rationality. They read a few books, listen to some podcast about money mindset, and start thinking they're the next Warren Buffett. That's not how this works. Rationality isn't a seminar. It's a habit and a hard one. You don't learn it once. You have to become it. That's why most people don't. They can quote the definition of compounding but still fall for lottery tickets. They can explain opportunity cost but can't skip a new iPhone. Human nature always beats logic in the short run. And the short run is where most people live. When people ask me, Charlie, what's the secret to wealth? I usually say, don't be stupid. But the truth is more uncomfortable. Most people can't help being stupid. They're wired for immediate gratification. The idea of waiting 10 years for a payoff makes them itch. And Wall Street knows this. That's why they sell action. They package excitement as opportunity. Meanwhile, the old lady with the threadbare coat keeps compounding quietly in the corner. She's boring, but she wins. You can't teach that kind of temperament. You can only recognize it and protect it. That's what Buffett and I built Berkshire Hathaway around. We designed it for people who think long-term by nature, not by instruction. Our shareholders aren't day traders. They're the kind who'd rather watch paint dry than chase the latest bubble. And it turns out that's a competitive advantage, because when the crowd is emotional, patience becomes arbitrage. Now, let's not romanticize it either. Delayed gratification has its own stupidity. Some people take it too far. They save so aggressively they forget to live. They hoard joy the way misers hoard coins, always waiting for a better time. I call that financial anorexia. It's not prudence, it's pathology. I once told someone, if you save every dime and die with a fortune but no memories, you've simply donated your life to compounding. You can't compound time. You can only waste it or use it. So yes, I believe in saving, but not in self-denial. I spent 2 or 3 cents out of every dollar and saved the rest. That ratio worked for me. I never needed much to be content. The real trick isn't how much you save, it's how little you need. Because when your expectations are reasonable, the whole world looks affordable. But here's where nature comes back again. Even if I tell you all this, half the audience won't do it. Some people simply can't stand inactivity. They'd rather feel busy losing money than feel lazy making it. That's human nature. We evolved to hunt, not to hold. So sitting on cash or waiting 10 years for a stock to play out feels like death to most people. They crave movement even when it kills them financially. That's why the markets never run out of noise. Every era has a new distraction. .coms, crypto, meme stocks, whatever the flavor of the week is. The technology changes, the psychology doesn't. You can replace roulette tables with algorithms, but the impulse behind both is identical. the need for stimulation, the desire for something to happen. And that's why patience will always be rare. It's not taught. It's inherited. People love to debate nature versus nurture as if one cancels the other. But the truth is, nurture only works if nature allows it. If you were born impulsive, you can improve, sure, but you'll always be fighting gravity. And gravity usually wins. The best investors I know aren't necessarily the smartest. They're the calmest. They have a temperament that doesn't require constant validation. They're willing to look stupid for a decade if it means being right in the end. And they usually are, because the market punishes impatience more than ignorance. So what's the lesson here? If you're naturally impatient, at least know it. Design around it. Automate your savings, avoid speculation, and stop pretending you'll turn into Ben Graham by Monday. If you're naturally prudent, guard that temperament like gold, because the world will try to talk you out of it. Every ad, every headline, every influencer is designed to make you feel behind. Don't buy it. Remember the old lady with 4,000 A shares? She didn't chase trends. She didn't need applause. She just sat quietly, letting arithmetic do the heavy lifting. And arithmetic, unlike emotion, never lies. That's the beauty and the cruelty of human nature. The patient few will always look foolish in the beginning. But when the noise fades and the charts crash, they'll still be standing. Everyone else will be out looking for the next sure thing. And they'll find it, of course. There's always another one waiting, just expensive enough to teach the same lesson again. People love to preach the gospel of delayed gratification. Save now, enjoy later. It sounds noble, disciplined, almost holy. But if you look closely, you'll notice most people preaching it don't know what later means. Later becomes someday. Someday becomes never. And before you know it, the savor is gone and the compounding stopped, not because the math failed, but because biology did. I'm not saying patience is bad. It's the cornerstone of investing. But like every good idea, it can be taken too far, usually by people who misunderstand it. Patience isn't about waiting forever. It's about waiting intelligently. There's a difference between delayed gratification and delayed life. I've seen people delay everything, vacations, hobbies, even joy, because they were obsessed with maximizing future comfort. They wouldn't spend a dime today if they thought it could grow into 2 dimes tomorrow. And yet, when tomorrow came, they were too old to bend down and pick it up. I call that the cult of delayed gratification. They worship compounding but forget mortality. They optimize spreadsheets while ignoring sunsets. Buffett once joked about it better than anyone. He said if you buy a 30-year government bond paying 3% and inflation is 2% after taxes, you'll be lucky to break even. In other words, you delay gratification for 3 decades, just end up riding the same number of rides at Disneyland. The same roller coaster, the same overpriced snacks. You've just postponed it for 30 years and convinced yourself it was wisdom. That's not delayed gratification. That's self-deception wrapped in thrift. When I was younger, I used to tell my kids, eat hamburgers now so you can eat steak later. It made sense back then. Money grew faster than inflation. But today, I'd tell them something different. Because what happens if the steak never comes? What if the economy changes, or your health fails, or the government invents a new way to tax your patience? Then you'll find out that saving without purpose isn't prudence. It's just postponed disappointment. The truth is, delayed gratification only works in systems that reward it. In a low-interest world, it becomes a trap. You're not saving for the future. You're subsidizing someone else's leverage. Look at the banks. They take your money, pay you nothing, and lend it out 10 times over. You call it saving. They call it inventory. Guess who's getting the better deal? I'm not suggesting you burn through your money. That's stupid in the opposite direction. But somewhere between reckless spending and obsessive saving lies sanity, and that's what most people never find. You should save to buy freedom, not furniture. And you should delay gratification only when the reward is greater than the wait. That's the part nobody teaches. They just say, patience pays. But patience only pays when the math agrees. Let's talk about inflation for a moment. People don't understand it. They think it's some abstract concept economists argue about on TV. In reality, it's the slow theft of purchasing power, invisible, polite, and relentless. If you save money at 3% interest, while inflation runs at 2%, your real return is basically zero. But the tax man still takes his cut on that 3%. So after taxes, you're losing ground. You've delayed gratification and been robbed quietly for your trouble. That's why I've always believed in rational delay, not moral delay. Saving isn't a virtue if it earns nothing. It's not virtuous to store cash in a system that punishes savers. It's just naive. If you're going to delay gratification, do it for something that compounds in real terms, not in spreadsheets. Invest in productive assets, not promises. Buy businesses, not bonds that guarantee poverty. That's how you preserve both money and sanity. The human mind has this weird bias toward purity. We think if something is good, more of it must be better. So a little patience is good, therefore. Endless patience must be divine. That's how you end up with people who refuse to enjoy life until their portfolio hits some arbitrary number. 5 million, 10 million. Whatever goal they think will make them feel safe. Here's the problem. Once they get there, they just move the goalpost. They're addicted to someday, and someday is the most dangerous word in the language of money because it steals today in small increments, quietly, rationally, almost admirably. When I talk about rational living, people sometimes assume I mean joyless living. That's not true. I enjoy a good meal, a smart conversation, and a quiet afternoon as much as anyone. But I enjoy them within reason. I don't delay gratification to the point of absurdity. I don't pretend I'll have infinite tomorrows because I've buried enough friends to know that tomorrows are finite. The goal isn't to die rich. It's to live wisely, which often means knowing when enough is actually enough. One of the funniest paradoxes in human behavior is that people think happiness is somewhere in the future waiting for them to arrive. But happiness is more like interest. It compounds only when you reinvest it regularly. If you defer it indefinitely, it expires. So yes, save for the future, but also buy the damn ice cream. Take your kids to the movie. Sit quietly with your spouse instead of reading the next financial forecast. That's not indulgence. That's maintenance. You're preserving something more valuable than money perspective. So when people talk about delayed gratification, remember this. It's not a moral commandment. It's a tool useful in moderation, deadly in excess. The right kind of delay builds freedom. The wrong kind builds regret. And most people can't tell the difference until it's too late. If you save money only to die with it, you've misunderstood the assignment. If you spend money only to impress others, you've failed it entirely. But if you can delay gratification long enough to make compounding work and still live a meaningful life, you've beaten the system. That balance is rare. But then again, so is wisdom. And as I've said before, if you can't be brilliant, at least be rational. I used to tell my family, we'll eat hamburgers now so we can eat steak later. It sounded smart, responsible, like the voice of discipline speaking over the noise of temptation. But here's the problem sometimes. The steak never comes. You save, you defer, you sacrifice little pleasures for the promise of bigger ones. And then the future shows up late, half empty, and overtaxed. You wait 30 years for that perfect dinner, only to find out the restaurant's closed. Delayed gratification works beautifully in theory. In reality, it often collides with the one variable everyone forgets: time. Time compounds too, just like money, but it compounds in the opposite direction. You get weaker, not stronger. You have less energy, not more. your curiosity shrinks, your health declines, and suddenly the things you were saving for don't feel worth doing anymore. So yes, you might finally afford the steak, but now you've got the cholesterol and the doctor's bill to go with it. I've seen this play out countless times. Hardworking people, thrifty to the bone, always saying someday we'll travel, someday we'll upgrade, someday we'll celebrate. Then one of them dies, and the other ends up sitting alone in a paid-off house with money but no meaning. That's not a victory. That's a cautionary tale. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not preaching recklessness. I'm preaching perspective. The point isn't to waste money, it's to use it before it becomes useless. There's a window in life when experiences still taste good. When joy is still vivid, miss that window, and no amount of money will reopen it. You can't buy back youth, health, or genuine curiosity. Not with all the compounding in the world. I once met a man who bragged about saving every penny. He hadn't taken a vacation in 20 years. He said, "When I retire, I'll see the world." I asked him, "What if the world doesn't wait for you?" He laughed, but I wasn't joking. A few years later, his health failed. All that money and no ability to spend it the way he'd planned. That's when I started rethinking my own hamburgers today, steak tomorrow philosophy. Because I realized sometimes a hamburger with good company today is worth more than a steak alone 30 years later. Modern culture loves the illusion of postponement. We think life is a sequence of checkpoints. Study now, earn later, save now, enjoy later, retire, and then finally live. But what if later never feels like living? What if by the time you get there, you've trained yourself out of joy? It happens more often than you think. People practice self-denial for so long that pleasure starts to feel like guilt. They've mastered the habit of sacrifice and forgotten the art of satisfaction. That's the dark side of delayed gratification. It turns rational restraint into emotional starvation. My rule has always been simple: spend less than you earn. But the second rule is just as important: don't make a religion out of saving. Money is a tool. It's supposed to enhance life, not replace it. And tools are useless if you never pick them up. Some people act like their bank account is a moral scoreboard. They believe saving more makes them better people. No, it just makes them tighter people. You can be prudent without being joyless. In fact, real prudence includes knowing when to spend and on what. There's a reason I talk so much about rationality. Rationality isn't about saying no all the time. It's about knowing why you say no and when to say yes. If you've done the math, if you've secured your future, and if your joy today won't bankrupt tomorrow, then for God's sake, say yes. Buy the book, take the trip, order the good wine once in a while. You're not a monk, you're a human being. Just make sure you're buying experiences, not ego. One enriches you, the other just decorates your stupidity. You know what most people misunderstand? They think I became rich because I worship frugality. No, I became rich because I respected frugality, but I also knew its limits. Frugality builds capital, but perspective keeps you sane. And sanity, I assure you, is worth far more than an extra percentage point of return. I've seen billionaires who couldn't enjoy a meal unless they were calculating its cost per calorie efficiency. They'd rather optimize dinner than taste it. That's not intelligence. That's a mental disorder with a spreadsheet. If you save every dime out of fear, you're not investing, you're hoarding. And hoarding is just another form of insecurity. The market doesn't punish it, but life eventually does. Because life has a nasty habit of cashing in your time while you're still waiting for the yield. One of the wisest things Buffett ever said, and I agree entirely, is this: if you're not happy with $50,000, you won't be happy with 50 million. That's not philosophy, that's arithmetic. Because happiness doesn't scale linearly. Security increases, sure. But contentment, that plateaus early. You reach a point where more money doesn't buy more meaning. After that, it's just keeping score. So maybe the question isn't, should I delay gratification? Maybe it's, What's worth delaying it for? If it's a compounding business, sure. If it's an opportunity that grows in value, absolutely. But if it's just another symbol, a car, a number, a future dinner you might never eat, maybe not. Because here's the harsh truth. The world is full of people waiting for their steak and dying of boredom in the meantime. They never realize the smartest way to enjoy life is the same way you invest incrementally. A little disciplina, a little joy, and a lot of perspective. If you spend wisely, you don't need to wait for steak. You already have the feast, just smaller portions spread across a lifetime. And that, my friend, is how you beat both poverty and regret. I've always believed in saving. I just never believed in worshiping it. There's a difference between being prudent and being pathological. And most people, when they talk about financial discipline, don't know where the line is. They think saving every dime is a virtue. I think it's a disease if you do it without reason. In my early years, I lived simply. I spent 2 or 3 cents out of every dollar I earned and saved the rest. That was enough. It kept me solvent, sane, and comfortable. But notice something. I didn't save every penny. I wasn't trying to die the richest corpse in the cemetery. That's a game for fools with calculators. The point of money isn't accumulation. It's utility. You save to buy independence, not deprivation. Frugality is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. The moment you start measuring your life in discount percentages, you've lost the plot. I once knew a man who bragged about reusing his tea bags 3 times. 3. He said it with pride as if he'd unlocked some secret to wealth. That man wasn't rich, he was trapped. He'd turned thrift into theater and deprivation into identity. If you need a spreadsheet to justify an ice cream cone, you're not frugal, you're neurotic. People forget that frugality, like investing, works best when it's rational, not emotional. If you cut every joy out of your life just to save a few bucks, you've made the same mistake as the guy who spends every dollar chasing pleasure. You've just chosen a different form of stupidity. The spender dies broke. The miser dies alone. Neither lived well. Now, I understand why people go overboard. They're scared. They think the future is a bottomless pit of risk and uncertainty. And fear makes people cling to money like it's oxygen. But fear isn't a financial strategy. It's just anxiety with a budget. The goal isn't to avoid spending. It's to spend intelligently. If money can buy you peace of mind, time, or health, that's a good trade. If it just buys you status, noise, or envy, that's a bad one. Simpler rule: buy utility. Rent pleasure. Ignore status. Most people don't get this. They think buying less means they're winning. But the purpose of frugality isn't to minimize expenses, it's to maximize options. Every dollar you don't waste gives you leverage later. But leverage is worthless if you never use it. You can't eat optionality. You have to cash it in sometime, preferably while you're still breathing. There's a story I once heard about a man who saved his whole life, never spent on anything unnecessary. He drove a 20-year-old car, wore the same coat every winter, and refused every invitation that cost more than $10. When he died, he left behind millions. People called him disciplined. I call him malfunctioning. He optimized for the wrong thing. He was efficient but not effective. And life, unlike investing, doesn't reward efficiency, it rewards balance. You want to know the truth about rich people? Most of them aren't misers. They're just selective. They don't count pennies because they're too busy counting opportunity costs. They'll spend lavishly on things that matter: education, ideas, people. But they won't waste a dime on things that scream insecurity. They've learned the difference between comfort and vanity. That's what the average person never figures out. People like to call me cheap. I'm not cheap, I'm precise. I don't mind spending when the value is clear, but I refuse to subsidize stupidity. That's why I hate unnecessary fees, bad products, and financial experts who sell illusions. I don't mind paying for excellence, I just won't pay for noise. If you're paying someone to make you feel smart, you're already the idiot in the transaction. The problem with extreme frugality is that it becomes self-reinforcing. You start believing you're morally superior because you spend less. It's like religious fasting, but without the enlightenment. Soon, you're not saving money to build wealth. You're saving to preserve your ego. And that's the most expensive thing a human can protect. You can't buy happiness, but you can certainly hoard misery. When I was younger, I used to walk past fancy stores and think, who needs this nonsense? Then I got older and realized it's not about needing. It's about enjoying responsibly. And if you can't enjoy a small luxury without guilt, you've failed financially, no matter how large your net worth is. Because real wealth is the ability to spend without anxiety. That's the whole point of having money, freedom from worry. If you still panic every time you open your wallet, you're not rich. You're just a hoarder with a bigger number. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The trick isn't to be brilliant, it's to be rational. And rationality applies to saving too. Save aggressively when you're young and poor. Save moderately when you're comfortable. Spend freely within reason when you've earned security. That's how adults behave. Children either eat the marshmallow immediately or hoard it until it rots. The wise man knows when to take a bite. Frugality is like salt. Use too little and you're reckless. Use too much and you ruin the meal. Use just enough and you make life taste right. That's not poetry. That's arithmetic for the soul. Because the goal isn't to have more money. It's to have fewer regrets. And trust me, nobody looks back at 90 and wishes they'd reused more tea bags. People think money will make them happy. They're wrong. It might make you comfortable, but comfort and happiness are two entirely different species. Comfort is physical. Happiness is psychological. And the bridge between them is narrower than most people can balance on. I've known more rich people than most mortals ever will. I've seen them in private, after the applause fades, after the magazine covers go yellow. And let me tell you, most of them aren't happier than the school teacher who lives down the street. They have more toys, yes. Better furniture, bigger pools, flashier funerals. But happiness, that plateaus fast. After a few million, the joy curve flattens. After a few dozen, it goes negative. You start managing your possessions instead of enjoying them. And you realize too late that wealth doesn't remove problems, it just changes their shape. If you're miserable with $50,000, you'll be miserable with 50 million. Because the thing that's broken isn't your income, it's your expectations. Money amplifies who you already are. If you're insecure, it makes you more insecure. If you're arrogant, it gives you a bigger microphone. If you're generous, it gives you scale. But it doesn't transform character. It exposes it. That's why I've seen billionaires implode in slow motion. They thought money was the cure for their unhappiness. Turns out it was just an accelerant. When you have too much, you start inventing problems. The private jet isn't fast enough. The chef overcooked the caviar. The art collection looks tired. I call it the disease of abundance, a condition where boredom masquerades as dissatisfaction. You keep upgrading your lifestyle because you've forgotten how to upgrade your mind. And that's the tragedy of success. You win the game, but the victory feels hollow because you've confused achievement with fulfillment. Happiness doesn't scale. Security does. Those are different equations. Security means you don't have to worry about rent, food, or medical bills. That's worth a lot far more than people appreciate. But beyond that, it's just scorekeeping. I've seen people who own islands and still envy their neighbors. Envy, by the way, is the dumbest sin because it's the only one you can't enjoy. You can't feel good about it. You just rot from the inside while pretending you're winning. Let me tell you something most people don't want to hear. The pursuit of happiness is overrated. You don't chase happiness, you cultivate it. and you cultivate it by aligning your expectations with reality, not fantasy. The world isn't designed to make you happy. It's designed to keep you chasing. And if you don't set your own boundaries, marketing departments will set them for you. They'll convince you that happiness comes in new packaging every 6 months and that you're just one upgrade away from feeling whole. That's how they keep the treadmill running. And people run themselves right into the grave trying to keep up. Warren and I live modestly, not because we're trying to make a statement, but because it's efficient. Simplicity reduces noise. And less noise means more clarity. You don't need marble floors to think clearly. You just need peace and a functioning brain. People often ask, why doesn't Buffett buy a yacht? Because he already owns the ocean, metaphorically speaking. When you understand value, you stop needing symbols. There's an old saying, money can't buy happiness, but it can rent it for a while, and at a high cost. The trouble is, once you rent it, you start needing constant renewals. The new car smell fades. The vacation ends. The applause quiets. And you're back to zero. That's because happiness derived from consumption is a subscription model that charges you endlessly, and the price always rises. Real happiness, on the other hand, compounds. It comes from competence, purpose, and relationships that aren't transactional. Those are boring words to most people. That's why most people never find them. I remember once being asked by a young investor, Mr. Munger, when did you feel rich? I told him, when I stopped needing anything. He looked disappointed, probably expected a dollar figure. But that's the truth. The day your desires shrink to match your reality, you've won the only game that matters. Because the secret to happiness isn't accumulation, it's elimination. Eliminate envy. Eliminate comparison. Eliminate the illusion that more will fix less. There. You'll sleep better, and paradoxically, you'll probably make better investments too. Happiness, for me, comes from clarity, from knowing what actually matters. And what matters is rarely on sale. It's time, health, and peace of mind. The rest is set dressing. You can own every luxury in the world and still be bankrupt in peace. Or you can live simply, think clearly, and be richer than 99% of humanity without needing anyone's validation. That's not a slogan. That's arithmetic again. Because satisfaction, like compounding, works silently and slowly until one day you wake up and realize you've got everything you need. The world will keep shouting that happiness is something you can buy, chase, or post about. Ignore it. Happiness is subtraction, not addition. Remove the noise. Remove the envy. Remove the illusion that you're missing out. And you'll find what all the billionaires are still searching for, a quiet mind that doesn't need proof. So yes, money is useful. It can buy freedom, options, and security. But happiness, that's a do-it-yourself project. And if you can't build it with what you have now, trust me, another zero in your net worth won't make you any better at it. Berkshire Hathaway is a peculiar place, and I say that with pride. We don't have layers of bureaucracy. We don't have committees voting on nonsense. We don't have memos bouncing around to make slow people look busy. We just think, act, and get things done. Warren and I built Berkshire deliberately to be different. Different from Wall Street. Different from corporate America. Different from the circus of short-term thinking that ruins most good ideas before they even hatch. We weren't trying to be rebels. We were just trying to be sane. And in a world addicted to complexity, sanity looks radical. People always ask, what's the Berkshire secret? There isn't one. We just avoid stupidity longer than most people can stay disciplined. We don't chase quarterly numbers. We don't hold board meetings to discuss irrelevant trivia. We don't issue press releases to brag about decisions that should be obvious. Our philosophy is boring, and that's precisely why it works. Most corporations operate like medieval courts. Everyone wants to look important. They speak in jargon, hide behind committees, and avoid accountability. That's why nothing gets done. At Berkshire, there's no room for that. There's no strategic synergy committee or innovation department. If you want something done, you pick up the phone, talk to Warren, and use your brain. No PowerPoints, no buzzwords, no consultants charging $500,000 to tell you what common sense already knows. People think our simplicity is accidental. It's not. It's engineered. We built Berkshire on the assumption that bureaucracy destroys performance, and time has proven us right. Every additional layer between thought and action is a tax on results. Every unnecessary meeting is a theft of productive energy. We just skipped all that, and we're not sorry about it. If you walk into Berkshire's headquarters at Omaha, you'll notice something strange. There's almost nothing there. No empire of executives, no marble lobby, no 20-story glass monument to ego. It's basically Warren and a few assistants, and somehow that tiny group manages hundreds of billions of dollars in capital. Why? Because competence scales better than committees. Warren and I never wanted to be like everyone else. We saw what everyone else looked like: over-leveraged, overconfident, and under-rational. We decided to go in the opposite direction. No debt we don't understand. No forecasts we can't explain. No strategies that depend on luck. That's the Berkshire way. It's not glamorous, but it's bulletproof. People often ask why we don't tell the public what we're buying and selling every day. Because it's none of their business. We're not an investment advisory service. We're not here to entertain traders or fill airtime on CNBC. We're here to compound capital rationally and quietly. If Apple's building a new product, they don't publish every prototype online. If a pharmaceutical company's working on a new drug, they don't live stream the lab tests. So why should we announce our ideas before we finished executing them? That's not transparency. That's stupidity. I once told someone, our job is to act rationally in a world that punishes patience. That's harder than it sounds, because the modern world wants everything loud, fast, and public. Berkshire operates on silence, slowness, and substance. We're the last adults left in a room full of attention seekers. When we buy something, we do it because the math makes sense, not because the headlines will. We also built Berkshire to be trustworthy. That word sounds quaint now, but it's still the most valuable asset you can own. If Warren gives his word, it's as good as a signed contract. That reputation has made us billions, not directly, but through the opportunities it attracts. When the world melts down, people call Berkshire. They know we'll pick up. They know we'll deliver. That's an advantage money can't buy and competitors can't copy. Some years back, Warren got a call on a Friday. By Sunday, he'd committed $10 billion, no lawyers, no committees, no endless approvals. And everyone involved knew the deal was solid. That kind of speed isn't recklessness. It's preparation. It's decades of rational decision-making distilled into one moment of trust. That's why Berkshire works. We make decisions like owners, not politicians. Our whole system runs on a simple equation: trust competent people, leave them alone, and measure them by results, not noise. That's why we've attracted managers who think like partners, not employees. They don't need hand-holding. They don't need memos. They just need freedom to do what they do best. It's amazing how much you can accomplish when you stop micromanaging grown adults. And yes, we're proud to be peculiar. People sometimes say Berkshire is old-fashioned. I take that as a compliment. We still believe in handwritten thank you notes, zero debt, and telling the truth. Those habits went out of style, but they never went out of utility. While others are busy optimizing for the next quarter, we're busy optimizing for the next generation. That's why our shareholders sleep better, and so do we. Being different makes people uncomfortable. They don't know how to categorize you. But I've learned something over 9 decades of watching human behavior. If you want average results, copy everyone else. If you want extraordinary results, learn to be misunderstood for a long, long time. That's Berkshire in one sentence. We'd rather be right later than popular now. And that's a policy that will never go out of business. Reputation is one of those assets that doesn't show up on a balance sheet but decides whether you survive the next storm. Most people don't understand that. They chase quarterly profits, publicity, or whatever Wall Street is worshiping this week and forget the only capital that can't be borrowed, credibility. At Berkshire, we treat reputation like oxygen. You don't think about it every second, but if it disappears, you die instantly. Warren and I have spent decades building that invisible asset. It didn't come from fancy branding, public relations, or virtue signaling. It came from the simplest, hardest thing in business, doing exactly what you said you would do every time. That's our secret. And it's shocking how rare it is. Most corporations have values written on a plaque somewhere. Integrity, transparency, teamwork, the list. They read like a Hallmark card written by lawyers. Then the same companies manipulate earnings, exaggerate results, and pay bonuses for short-term stupidity. They don't have values, they have slogans. At Berkshire, our values aren't written on the wall, they're baked into the contracts, and more importantly, into our behavior. When the world is falling apart, people call Berkshire. They don't call us because we're cheap. They call us because they trust that we'll do what we say when we say it, and without drama. That trust has made us billions over time, not because we try to monetize integrity, but because it attracts the right kind of opportunities. In business, reputation works like compound interest. You don't see it growing day to day, but over decades it becomes unstoppable. One good decision reinforces another, and soon people assume correctly that you won't behave like a jackass. That assumption is worth more than any marketing campaign. Warren once said, "It takes 20 years to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it." He was being generous. Some people can ruin it in 5 seconds flat. And most of them do it for ego. They want to look smart, aggressive, or innovative. So they cut corners, exaggerate numbers, or chase a deal they don't fully understand. They trade long-term trust for short-term applause. It's a bad trade. And I've never met anyone smart enough to make it twice. At Berkshire, our reputation allows us to do things that would take others months or years. Someone can call on a Friday night, and by Sunday we've committed $10 billion. No lawyers, no circus, no committee. Why? Because when Berkshire says yes, it's a binding contract. That's the kind of reputation money can't buy and competitors can't copy. It's not built on marketing. It's built on math, memory, and moral consistency. And in a chaotic world, that kind of reliability becomes priceless. You want to know what reputation really is? It's a stored version of your past behavior. It's how the world prices your word. If you've spent a lifetime keeping promises, the market will give you credit even before you speak. If you've spent a lifetime breaking them, no amount of charm or talent will save you. In finance, that's called risk premium. In life, it's called consequence. I've seen this in business after business. The ones that blow up are rarely the ones with bad math. They're the ones with bad ethics. They confuse cleverness with integrity and assume they can cheat the system indefinitely. But the system always catches up. Markets are like mirrors eventually. Everyone's true reflection shows up. And some people don't like what they see. Reputation, when managed well, also acts as a filter. It attracts the partners you want and repels the ones you don't. We don't deal with people we don't trust, no matter how good the deal looks. If someone lies to us once, they're disqualified for life. Not because we're moral crusaders, but because dishonesty is a permanent business risk. A liar doesn't lie selectively. He lies habitually. And betting against human nature is the fastest way to lose money. That's why we keep Berkshire simple. We only work with people who don't need babysitting. We give them freedom because they've earned it. And they protect that freedom because they know what it's worth. It's a self-reinforcing system of trust. No need for endless oversight or corporate theater. Just intelligent adults doing what they said they'd do. That's how you build an empire without a bureaucracy. In the modern era, reputation has become fragile. One stupid tweet, one viral headline, and people lose what took them decades to earn. But that's only half the story. The other half is that if your character is consistent, you can survive any temporary nonsense. A strong reputation is like a moat. It protects you when the world loses its mind. And lately, the world's been losing it a lot. Most people underestimate how valuable it is to be trusted immediately. It saves time, friction, and negotiation. It's the difference between being called for a deal and waiting for an invitation that never comes. Every time we've acted honorably, the dividends have been exponential, not just financially, but psychologically. It's easier to sleep when you don't have to remember what you lied about. Warren and I never set out to be good guys. We set out to be rational guys. And it just so happens that rationality, practiced long enough, looks a lot like virtue. Because doing the right thing isn't just morally sound, it's economically efficient. It saves you from lawsuits, headaches, and reputational bankruptcy. And it creates an invisible flywheel of trust that spins for decades. So, if you want a real competitive advantage, forget about the fancy titles, the innovation labs, or the PR stunts. Build a reputation that makes people relax when they hear your name. It's slow, unglamorous work, and most won't bother. That's why it still pays so well. You can steal ideas, money, or even people, but you can't counterfeit integrity. It has to be earned the long way, one honest decision at a time. Reputation isn't a brand. It's the residue of character. And in the long run, that residue compounds faster than capital. That's the Berkshire way and the only way worth following. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. When the world goes to hell in a handbasket, you want to be in the right company. And I don't say that as poetry. I say it as arithmetic. Because when panic sets in, math becomes morality. And most people fail both. At Berkshire, we've spent decades preparing for the day everyone else loses their minds. We don't know when it's coming. We just know it will. History guarantees it. Markets swing between two emotions, greed and fear. We simply choose to remain sober while everyone else is drunk. That alone has made us rich. People like to think crises are rare. They're not. They're just spaced out enough for each generation to believe it's different this time. 1929, 1973, 2008, and whatever nonsense the future will cook up next. It's the same story with new costumes, overconfidence, leverage, stupidity, repeat. The script never changes. Only the actors do. Berkshire's secret weapon isn't luck or genius. It's liquidity and composure. When everyone else is selling in terror, we have cash and the guts to use it. When everyone else freezes, we act. That's not heroism. That's just preparation meeting panic. People call it courage. I call it patience with dry powder. During the Great Recession, when companies were collapsing faster than journalists could spell bankruptcy, Berkshire didn't flinch. We wrote billion-dollar checks while the smartest people in the room were hiding under their desks. Not because we were fearless, but because we'd already accepted fear as part of the process. You don't rise above panic. You plan for it. That's why we hold cash not as a fetish, but as firepower. Cash gives you optionality. Optionality gives you calm. And calm gives you clarity when everyone else is losing theirs. The average investor hates cash because it doesn't earn anything. They forget that it earns the most important thing, survival. It's what allows you to play offense when others are too busy cleaning up their own wreckage. People misunderstand what we mean by being prepared. It's not about predicting the next crash. It's about deserving to survive it. You can't time disasters, but you can build a system that doesn't collapse under pressure. That's Berkshire. Simple, sturdy, and unleveraged. We like to say we sleep well at night, not because we're lucky, but because we've already rehearsed the nightmare. In every crisis, you'll see two kinds of people: the overextended and the underdisciplined. One borrowed too much. The other believed too much. They both end up in the same place, broke and confused. Meanwhile, the boring guy who kept his powder dry walks in, buys their assets for pennies, and looks like a genius. He's not a genius. He's just not stupid. I remember a young analyst once asked me, "How do you stay calm during a crash?" I told him, "You don't. You plan while you're calm, so you don't have to improvise while you're terrified." That's the whole trick. You win by thinking clearly when it still feels unnecessary. Because when clarity finally matters, it's already too late for most people. Our reputation, our cash position, and our patience, they all tie together. They're the three legs of our survival stool. Remove one, and the chair tips over. Reputation brings us deals. Cash allows us to act. Patience lets us wait until the odds are finally tilted in our favor. That combination turns chaos into opportunity, and that's why Berkshire always comes out stronger after every panic. The truth is, panic reveals character faster than prosperity. When the tide goes out, you find out who's been swimming naked and in some cases who's been stealing the swimsuits. Every time there's a market frenzy, people act like the laws of gravity have been repealed. And every time, gravity wins. Markets reward discipline and punish delusion. It just takes time for the punishment to be served. During 1973, I watched investors sell wonderful companies at half their value simply because they were scared. They weren't thinking, they were reacting. Fear does that. It compresses IQ faster than alcohol. The irony is, those moments of collective stupidity are when the biggest fortunes are made by the people who aren't participating in the hysteria. That's what we train for, to sit still while the world hyperventilates. It's not glamorous, but it's profitable. And here's the paradox. Everyone says they'll be brave when the market crashes. They won't. They'll panic exactly like everyone else, because they never built the temperament to handle being uncomfortable. They mistake optimism for resilience. Resilience isn't smiling through pain. It's functioning through pain. It's writing checks while others write obituaries. It's keeping your head when headlines scream apocalypse. That's what Berkshire does best. We don't root for chaos, but we're ready for it. That readiness comes from decades of not lying to ourselves. We admit that fear is part of the game, that losses happen, and that the future will always surprise you. And because we accept those truths, we don't have to panic when they arrive. That's rationality in practice. Not emotionless, just balanced. So when people ask me, "Charlie, what happens if the world goes to hell?" I tell them, then you'll be in good company. Because we've been there before. We've made money there before, and we'll do it again calmly, quietly, without drama. That's what survival looks like in business. Prepared, patient, and slightly amused by everyone else's hysteria. The world will always go mad from time to time, but it will also always come back to arithmetic. And arithmetic never panics. I recently got invited to a Bitcoin happy hour. Imagine that. A bunch of people celebrating volatility. They said it would be fun. I said I already knew how it ended, just like every other speculative mania in human history. The only thing new about Bitcoin is the marketing. The stupidity is ancient. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not against innovation. I'm against illusion. There's a difference. Innovation creates value. Delusion creates volatility. And Most of what gets sold as financial innovation is just a complicated way to separate fools from their money. I once joked that the Bitcoin crowd reminds me of a religion that worships Judas Iscariot. They glorify betrayal of reason, of math, of common sense. They preach decentralization, but their real God is greed. They don't want a better financial system. They want a faster casino. And Wall Street, of course, was happy to build it for them, complete with ETFs, influencers, and overpriced conferences full of visionaries selling tickets to the next Tulip Festival. I've been alive long enough to recognize this pattern. Every generation thinks it's invented the shortcut to wealth. And every generation learns painfully that the laws of economics don't care about your enthusiasm. In 1952, on my honeymoon, I stopped in Las Vegas. Back then, casinos were elegant. Men in tuxedos. Women in dresses. Everyone looked intelligent until they opened their wallets. They came thousands of miles to do something they knew was mathematically dumb. They weren't stupid in theory. They were stupid in practice. That's Bitcoin in a nutshell. Well-dressed people doing dumb things with confidence. The human brain loves the idea of something for nothing. We evolved to chase quick rewards, not slow ones. That's why people gamble, speculate, and trade digital nonsense at 2 a.m. They call it investing, but it's not investing. It's entertainment with worse odds. Investing is buying productive assets that generate cash over time. Speculating is buying hope and calling it technology. If you don't know the difference, the market will teach it to you expensively. People tell me, Charlie, you just don't understand blockchain. That's fine. I also don't understand astrology, and it seems to work about as well. Whenever someone has to explain why an idea is brilliant using 20 buzzwords and 0 cash flow, you can safely assume it's nonsense. In my world, the test is simple. Does it produce anything? Does it serve a real need? Can it survive without recruiting new believers? If the answer is no, congratulations, you found a cult, not a company. I've watched fads come and go. The dot-com bubble, the housing bubble, the SPAC bubble, the crypto bubble, same music, new instruments. The melody never changes. People start with, this time is different. Then comes, everyone's getting rich. Then comes, it's too big to fail. And finally, no one could have seen this coming. Every time I laugh, because we saw it coming. We just didn't want to believe it. Bitcoin, in particular, fascinates me not as an investment, but as a psychological experiment. It proves that humans would rather believe in magic than arithmetic. A digital token with no intrinsic value, no regulatory anchor, no productive output, and yet it commands trillions in collective faith. That's not finance. That's mass hypnosis. And like every hypnosis act, the magic ends the moment people wake up. I'm old enough to remember when speculation was a dirty word. Now it's a business model. We've financialized dopamine. Every time your phone pings with a price alert, it's a slot machine disguised as progress. And make no mistake, the house always wins. The exchanges, the promoters, the platforms, they all make money whether you do or not. You are the product. You just don't realize it until the music stops. People ask me, but Charlie, what if you're wrong? What if Bitcoin really changes the world? Then I'll happily admit it from the comfort of my portfolio full of productive businesses that generate cash while others chase illusions. You don't have to swing at every pitch in life, especially not the ones thrown by carnival barkers in digital costumes. The goal isn't to be trendy. It's to be solvent. There's a deep irony here. Bitcoin was supposed to be a rebellion against the system, and yet it became the system's favorite distraction. While people were busy trading imaginary coins, the real businesses, the ones that make, sell, and build things quietly, got richer. That's how capitalism always wins. It rewards the doers while the dreamers argue about definitions. I often say that the biggest risk to your wealth isn't inflation, taxation, or regulation. It's stupidity, especially your own. And Bitcoin, in my view, is stupidity weaponized by marketing. A shiny object designed to make you forget that value, in the end, must be earned. Not mean it, not minted, earned through discipline, patience, and rational behavior, all the things speculators find boring. So when someone tells you they're a crypto millionaire, smile politely, congratulate them, then wait. Time is the great audit, and it never misses a fraud. I'm not against risk. I'm against pretending that risk doesn't exist. That's what most Bitcoin enthusiasts do. They romanticize volatility and call it freedom. But freedom without understanding is chaos, and chaos eventually hands its assets to the prepared. That's why Berkshire doesn't chase these fads, because when the circus leaves town, the elephants always leave a mess, and we prefer to own the cleanup crew. So no, I'm not attending the Bitcoin happy hour. I already know what they're celebrating, the illusion of intelligence, and I've seen enough of those parties to know how they end, with a hangover paid for in real money. After 9 decades on this planet, I've learned something that should be obvious, but isn't. The goal isn't to be rich. The goal is to stay rational long enough to live well, because wealth without sense is just delayed misery, and sense without some joy isn't worth living for. That balance between discipline and delight is where real intelligence hides. People often assume I lived a life of sacrifice, that I denied pleasure to chase compounding. They're wrong. I didn't sacrifice. I optimized. I enjoyed life within reason. I let compounding do the heavy lifting so I didn't have to live in constant anxiety. That's the part most people miss. Rational living isn't about being joyless. It's about building a life where joy doesn't bankrupt you. Some people live like they'll never die. Others live like they're dying tomorrow. Both are fools. The first never enjoys what they've earned. The second never earns what they enjoy. Wisdom lives somewhere in the middle where prudence funds freedom, and freedom doesn't destroy prudence. When you think rationally long enough, you stop asking, how can I have more? You start asking, what do I actually need? And the answers get smaller. You stop buying things to impress people who don't think about you. You stop confusing comfort with happiness. You stop mistaking motion for progress. You realize peace is the highest yield investment of them all. Warren and I never set out to build a monument. We just wanted independence, the ability to live and think on our own terms. That was the definition of wealth for us. Freedom from nonsense. And if you look at Berkshire today, that's still what it is. A monument to independence. We don't bow to Wall Street. We don't follow fads. And we don't care what the crowd thinks. Because the crowd, more often than not, is insane. I've seen it all, the booms, the busts, the bubbles, the geniuses who turn out to be lunatics. Every few years, someone promises a new way to get rich faster. And every few years, arithmetic quietly kills the fantasy. You'd think people would learn. They don't. Human nature doesn't update with each software version. So if you want to win, don't try to outsmart everyone. Just outlast their stupidity. That's how rational joy works. You stay sane long enough to watch everyone else self-destruct. Happiness, in my view, isn't about excitement. It's about absence, the absence of envy, fear, and regret. It's a quiet mind, not a noisy bank account. It's the ability to look at your life and say, I didn't trade peace for prestige. And the funny thing, once you stop needing constant stimulation, life becomes more stimulating. You start noticing how rich a simple day can be. A walk, a good book, a problem worth solving, a person worth keeping. That's the real compounding. I've often said, if you can't be brilliant, be rational. But here's the secret. Rationality isn't cold. It's compassionate, especially toward yourself. It forgives mistakes quickly. It laughs at failure. It saves its energy for things that actually matter. I've seen people torture themselves chasing perfection. They want every decision to be flawless, every investment to be brilliant. That's not rationality, that's ego wearing a tie. A rational person aims for consistency, not perfection. They know that avoiding stupidity beats seeking genius. And they understand that joy, like profit, is a byproduct of good process. You can't live forever, so you might as well live intelligently. And intelligent living means understanding trade-offs. Everything you say yes to means saying no to something else. So you might as well choose carefully. Say yes to work that teaches you. Say yes to people who tell you the truth. Say yes to habits that compound. Say no to envy, noise, and fake urgency. That's not philosophy, that's maintenance. It keeps your mental engine from overheating. You want to know the real irony. All the things that make life meaningful don't require brilliance, just restraint. Patience, gratitude, reliability, a sense of humor. These traits are boring, so people overlook them. But they're what keep you from blowing yourself up financially and emotionally. I call that rational joy. The happiness that comes from not being an idiot for long periods of time. You'll never see that phrase on a motivational poster. It doesn't sell books, but it works. Rational joy means being content without being complacent, disciplined without being dull, generous without being gullible. It's the middle path between excess and fear, and it's the only one that scales with age. When I was younger, I thought success would feel like victory. It doesn't. It feels like quiet relief, like surviving your own mistakes long enough to see the world prove you right. And if you've done that with your integrity intact, you've already won. People think legacy is about buildings and headlines. I think it's about habits that outlive you. If you've taught someone to think clearly, to save wisely, to stay calm in chaos, you've done more good than most politicians and gurus combined. Because clear thinking spreads quietly, but it compounds loudly. Just like capital. That's the legacy I care about. And I hope a few people carry it forward, not to worship me or Warren, but to learn from our mistakes faster than we did. So if there's one lesson from all of this, from the saving, the spending, the crises, and the Bitcoin clowns, it's this. Be rational long enough to deserve a peaceful life. Not a flashy one, not a perfect one, a peaceful one. Because in the end, peace is what money was supposed to buy you all along. And if you can reach that point, congratulations. You've mastered the only game that actually matters.
这段视频深入探讨了查理·芒格对金钱、投资和人性的独特见解。芒格首先指出，在金融领域，天性、气质往往比后天培养更重要。有些人生来就谨慎，而另一些则倾向于冲动。他以一位拥有巨额伯克希尔股票却依然节俭的95岁老妇人为例，说明真正的纪律是与生俱来的。视频批评了过度延迟满足的金融厌食症，强调储蓄是为了获取自由，而非自我剥夺，并警告在低利率和高通胀环境下，盲目储蓄可能适得其反。芒格还阐述了伯克希尔、哈撒韦的成功哲学，保持简单，拒绝官僚主义，并以声誉作为最宝贵的无形资产。他强调在危机时刻，流动性与冷静是关键，而不是预测市场。视频对包括比特币在内的投机狂潮提出了尖锐批评，认为他们只是包装成创新的愚蠢。最后，芒格总结道，真正的智慧在于平衡纪律与愉悦，实现理性生活，其终极目标是获得内心的平静和自由，而非无止境的金钱积累或盲目追求幸福。他认为，平和的心境远比吵闹的银行账户更有价值，因为幸福是一种需要定期再投资的复利。